Take a good look at this. It looks like an eye, doesn't it? The internet swears by it. Joe Rogan says it's real. Millions of people believe that Atlantis is hiding right here in the middle of the African Sahara. Others look beneath the ice, to Antarctica, or into the darkest trenches of the ocean. We are all holding a map, looking for that X. But what if I told you that map is fake? The story you know, flying ships, crystals giving infinite energy, laser weapons. I'm sorry, but none of that is history. That is cheap science fiction, written in 1882. Yes, we have a culprit. His name is Ignatius Donnelly, and for 150 years, the whole world has believed his lie. It actually started much earlier, in 360 BC, with the famous philosopher Plato. Plato wrote about Atlantis in his books. But wait, if you open Plato's book, you won't find laser weapons, flying saucers, or super technology. You won't even find a perfect paradise. For Plato, Atlantis wasn't a utopia, it was the enemy, a rich, spoiled, imperialist state that lost its morality and attacked the world. Plato wrote this story for one reason, to teach a moral lesson. So for him, Atlantis was just like Star Wars, a fiction, a script, until Ignatius Donnelly took the stage. This man wasn't an archaeologist. He wasn't a historian. He was a failed politician, but he wrote history's most successful lie. Donnelly took Plato's moral lesson and said, "Every word of this is literally true." He said, "The Egyptians didn't build the pyramids. Atlantean refugees did." He said, "The Mayans stole this technology from Atlantis." The high-tech Atlantis idea you see in movies today doesn't belong to Plato. It belongs entirely to this man's fan fiction. But there was one thing Donnelly didn't know. Plato didn't completely make it up. There really was a civilization that vanished in a single night. But it wasn't the gods who destroyed them. It was the biggest explosion the world has ever seen. The date is 1600 BC. The location, the Aegean Sea, the island of Thera, also known today as Santorini. The people living here weren't aliens. They were the Minoan civilization. And yes, they were the superpower of their time. While people in Europe were still living in simple huts, the Minoans lived in 4-story palaces. They had art on their walls, working sewer systems, and even hot running water. They were the masters of the seas, but they had no idea about the monster sleeping beneath their feet. When that day came, the Thera volcano erupted. This was no ordinary eruption. It was 4,000 times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. The sound was so loud, it was heard thousands of kilometers away. The sky turned black for days. But the real apocalypse came after the explosion. The island collapsed into itself. And this collapse created massive tsunamis. 30-meter-high waves wiped out the magnificent Minoan navy, their ports, and their cities. A civilization, thousands of years of progress, was erased from history, as Plato said, in a single day and a single night. But is this just a theory? No, we have a body, and we have fingerprints. Its name, Akrotiri. When archaeologists started digging through the ash on Santorini in 1967, they couldn't believe their eyes. Just like Pompeii, they found a ghost city, perfectly preserved under the volcanic ash. And the details in this city were eerily identical to what Plato wrote. What did Plato write about Atlantis? The buildings were made of red, black, and white stone. If you go to Santorini today, you will see the volcanic rocks are exactly those 3 colors. What did Plato say? Hot and cold water springs were side by side. This is a volcanic island. That is exactly how geothermal springs work. And most importantly, Plato wrote that the people of Atlantis worshipped bulls and played dangerous games with them. Do you know what was found on the frescoes in Akrotiri? Athletes jumping over charging bulls. This is not a coincidence. This is the biological proof that the legend of Atlantis is actually the city of Akrotiri. So, how did a volcanic eruption in the Aegean Sea turn into a legend called Atlantis thousands of years later? The answer lies in history's oldest game of telephone. There was a witness to the demise of the Minoans, the Egyptians. The Egyptians knew the Minoans. They traded with them. But after that eruption, the ships from the north suddenly stopped coming. The sky darkened. Giant waves hit their shores. The Egyptians recorded this in their temples. The mighty people living in the middle of the sea were swallowed by the waters in a single night. Centuries passed. The Athenian statesman Solon visited Egypt. The old Egyptian priests read these ancient records to him. Solon brought this story back to Greece. The story was passed down from generation to generation, exaggerated, changed, and finally, it reached Plato. Plato used this real disaster for his own philosophical purpose, but he needed a villain for his story. So, he took the terrible fate of the Minoans, but he twisted their character. He turned these peaceful engineers into warmongering tyrants, just to show that even the mightiest can fall if they lose their way. He gave them the name Atlantis. He turned the volcanic eruption into a punishment from the gods. So Atlantis was not a figment of imagination. Atlantis was the mythological reflection of a real event that traumatized humanity's collective memory. Today, if you buy a plane ticket and go to the island of Santorini, what will you see? Those beautiful whitewashed houses with blue roofs, thousands of tourists watching the unique sunset, and a peaceful, deep blue sea. But do you know what you are actually looking at? That giant empty space in the middle of the crescent-shaped island is not just a sea view. It is a crime scene. It is a massive scar left by the greatest disaster in history. We humans have been looking for a ghost city under the oceans and ice for centuries because we want to believe in magic. We want to believe in lasers, crystals, and aliens. But the truth has been right in front of our eyes the whole time. Atlantis isn't lost. Atlantis is that island where tourists sunbathe and honeymoon couples take photos. And in my opinion, accepting the truth as it is much more fascinating than believing in fake legends. Because this story reminds us not of the power of crystals, but of how fragile human intelligence and that magnificent Minoan engineering really are. Nature can wipe out even the greatest civilizations in a single move. But stories continue to live for thousands of years. Maybe Plato was right. Atlantis wasn't a place, it was a lesson, and we are still trying to learn that lesson. Keep your compass curious. See you on the next expedition.